So, okay. So then, Greg, if you'd like to just why are you interested in taking part in developing this training, empathy training?
And so for the last 10 years, I've been a trainer at a juvenile justice agency. So just interested always in learning processes for people to engage with content, but also then to actually to process and take it in. So just interested in that aspect. I feel like I'm a lifelong learner, still in school, probably sign up for 10 webinars a week and maybe make 3 of them, but just access to education and learning. And so one of the things simply that intrigued me was the idea of this online, freely available, accessible training for folks. So on empathy, which I think is important. And I guess primarily the topic, I think it's what maybe Bill even says this in an introduction, truly what the world needs now. Seems like probably always, but now more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a global issue, but particularly a U.S. issue of division and taking sides and not truly listening and even trying to understand another's point of view. So interested in the topic. And then having experienced the restorative circle facilitation training that I went through and experienced circles for the first time, so the emphasis on building safety, building trust and relationship and repairing relationship, that's important to me. And I feel like just the title, the empathy circle, thinking through how we do that, how we communicate with one another, very intriguing to me.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is going to contribute to addressing the polarization as well as healing, like within restorative practices.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Denise?
Yeah, there. So that's interesting that Greg brought that up because, I consider most of my career has been, for all that time, has been really dedicated to teaching and helping people develop their empathy skills. But my interest in sort of pushing that out has really come from the political situation in the U.S. and my distress with that polarization and with the just this complete lack of understanding or communication. And I come from a family both of origin and my current family and my extended family that is completely divided politically. So I've been living with this side thing since I was a kid. My parents were on opposite sides of the political front, and all of my siblings are they're all over the place, and it's a real. And it's something I live with in my home. And so while I can practice empathy professionally, and when I'm working with people, the challenge of trying to be empathic and be willing to listen to and not just argue with, and being able to sort of create that circle within the family and not buy into the polarization and find a way to facilitate moving forward. It's really kicked it up for me where I'm interested in taking that idea and the skills involved to doing some healing around getting beyond that polarization. And so it's a personal thing for me in terms of both in my own family, but also across the board of trying to figure that out. And, I had a conversation with Bill Miller about this. He has another little book out that is wonderful called Loving Kindness. and we were discussing that book, and I said, I just don't know. I said, it's really hard for me to think about wanting to understand or really bridge the divide. I just don't know that I'm capable of doing that. And he goes, Denise, you know how to listen. And that's what you need. And so I think that it's also Bill is my mentor, and I honor that he indicated that was important. That was a gift that I had. And so I want to find a way to make that gift available. And so.
Okay, what I'm hearing there is that you're wanting to, you see the polarization in the society as well as within your family, and you're wanting to contribute to overcoming that through with empathy and seeing this as a contribution to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Deborah, thank you.
Thanks. So I go back to what the mindfulness practice has done for me is it's helped me and others in teaching people to listen to themselves, because it starts there. And I have noticed that there's a element of integration that occurs in people, because people live within their own polarization, internally. So my interest is helping people give empathy to themselves first. And I learned that from the NVC groups I was in. And I found it hugely helpful, because it's not that it's bad to go to someone who knows how to give empathy, or a therapist, or seek external assistance, but we don't always have that available. You wake up at 2 a.m. and an anxiety attack or something, and people are continually unconsciously processing their turmoil, their dilemma, that, what is going on with them, without knowing how to settle the mind, settle the body, so you can see, and then say, oh, I'm feeling anxious because I have a need for connection with this person. Whereas prior to coming to that understanding, you were just in angst or anxiety about, when are they going to call me? When am I going to reach? How am I going to reach out? Whatever the issue is. So helping people understand what's going on in the moment, and training themselves to give themselves empathy. And that does occur in learning how to do an exchange with it. But I think you have to have that experience in an exchange, and then you go, well, what else? Where do I go from here with that? And I think that's a much needed tool. I think we look a lot at external circumstances and think we can fix the external circumstance. And a lot of the time we can't. So how do we get through that dilemma and that angst of whatever it is, whether it's politically or with your neighbor or with yourself? And I think the empathy starts at home.
Okay, so I just do a little reflection here, is what I'm hearing is it's really that self-empathy. You're wanting to contribute to support people in developing self-empathy, self-connection, and within that internal polarization, how to heal that internal polarization. Yes. And that's sort of an area that you would like to contribute to.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and we're taking notes here. I think it was Andrea, you discovered it too. Took a few notes. So at the bottom of the page 3, if you feel like taking notes about what's said, you can take notes in the document too. So if you see me kind of going down, that's me taking notes. Dea, would you like to share?
Yeah. Actually, I did write in the document, and then something else came up now listening to all of you also. I grew up in a family with lot of conflicts. We've had a lot of conflicts, and I've really seen people just torn apart. And I guess really for me, a lot of the questioning of how can but at the same time, everyone was really, really dear to me, but we just had no space to listen to each other. And in my explorations with teaching, I was starting to try to see, is there a way that we can actually listen beyond all this hurt that has been created over the years? And after starting to learn and practice NVC, I have reached out, and there's a lot of even though between two other like my cousins, or even if they are not talking, at least there is a medium where they're feeling heard. And I found that there is some kind of restoration of connection that happened when I tried this with my family. And something from what I wrote in the document was, I had an experience of a friend calling me to intervene in a situation where a girl had locked herself up. And I was just I just thought that I could try empathy. And when I just gave her empathic listening through the door, and that kind of made her come out and be able to come out of the room. And which, I mean, I haven't seen the girl also. I got a call from her mom saying that she did come out, and she was able to engage with her mom later. And it was after this experience particularly that I kind of felt that it's really possible to engage when a situation is intense also, if there is someone to have or give space for empathic listening. And if more people knew a way of holding space empathetically, I feel, it's just creates a space of being able to be heard and heal whatever pain that comes up in conversations, in conflicts at home. And also with political polarization at present in India, the government that we have here has created a lot of divide within the people also here. Here also kind of facing similar situations of caste and class divides. And I connect to what Denise said also about how I see that within my family also, with very different views of how each one of us are sometimes not able to talk to each other because of these different, highly different ideas. And so I'm quite excited being able to create this space and make it available for more people to learn and be able to be present to what someone else is saying.
Okay, well, I'll give you a little reflection. What I'm hearing there is, so you're concerned about seeing people being torn apart, especially with your family, and you have a sense of care for everyone, and you would like them to be able to work through those. And it's you're seeing that empathy helps with pains, conflicts, and polarization. And so you're just seeing kind of the benefits of empathy. If we can create this training, that would be a contribution basically to support. So okay. So that was a bit of a trying to get to the why, why is everyone interested in taking part? And we can have that for the record and kind of build on that. So so what I wanted to do next was introduce the empathy circle. So what I found, from my work with empathy is it's this mutual empathic listening at the core, which is the easiest way of kind of foundational practice. So I just call it an empathy circle where we do empathic listening. So if you're in NVC or with Mint or motivational interviewing, you listen to someone, you do reflection of what you're hearing them say. And what we want to do with the empathy circle is make that a peer-to-peer circle where everyone gets a chance to speak, the person reflects back, and we go in a circle. So in this meeting, I wanted to introduce the basic empathy circle practice, and then we'll be, as we go through the book chapters, we'll be sort of deepening that practice. And I have a little handout. I had put that, hopefully I can bring that up. I just wanted to share it on the screen. And, oops, I closed it. So this is a basic, just a one-page handout that we use. Oh, and I might mention too, in terms of the polarization, that was a big topic here that came up, was polarization, political polarization. In chapter 15 of the book, Bill Miller talks about that polarization and addressing it. And that's something that we have done with our empathy tent. I don't know if you had a chance to see the empathy tent material. You can go to empathytent.com. So we have this tent that we go out in public, and we've been going to these political battles, the political left and right, knock down, drag out, street fights. We set up the empathy tent. We offer listening to all sides as well as mediation between the sides. So as a goal, sort of with this training, we like it to be kind of geared towards activism, right? So that people, not only do we learn these skills between each other, but that we can move towards this more of an activist stance approach. And so we want to, let me bring this up and I'll share this. And we're going to give an overview. I had sent out the PDF, but I'll share it on the screen here. And this is the basic handout that we have, that when we go with the empathy tent, we kind of hand this out. And with just these basic instructions, this is like just the most basic instructions for doing an empathy circle. And, it's pretty easy to get started. And so this is, we like to have a circle of 3 to 5 participants is ideal. Just having a smaller amount gives everyone more chance to speak. And in this process, the first person, if there's 4 people, let's say the first person will be the speaker, and they select who they're going to speak to. And then they speak about whatever comes up. You can just say anything you'd like. And the listener reflects back what it is that they're hearing the speaker say till the speaker feels heard to their satisfaction. And then once the speaker feels heard, completely heard, they can say something like, I feel fully heard. And then it becomes the listener's turn to speak, and they select someone to speak. And the dialogue continues around the circle for whatever the time allotted is. And so some tips for the speaker is pause often to give the listener a chance to reflect what they have heard. So if you speak for a long time, the listener may not be able to recall it all. When you're done speaking, you can say, I feel fully heard, to indicate that you're done and that it's the listener's turn to speak. And so you can also, we're going to have a time limit. So we're going to be practicing it after this, and there'll be a time limit of 5 minutes per speaker, at least to begin with. And then for the active listener, some tips is when you're reflecting back is you just reflect back the essence of what you're hearing the person say. And while the speaker is speaking, you're not like, you don't want to ask questions and judging or analyze or detach or diagnose. So these are some of the blocks to empathy. But whenever it's your turn, you can say anything you want. You can be as judgmental as you want or whatever. Just feel free to say whatever you want to say as the speaker. But as the listener, you can ask the speaker to pause and say, can you just pause for a second? I like to just reflect back what I'm hearing, because if the speaker is saying too much, it can be kind of hard to recall. You kind of lose the thread of what they're saying. And the silent listeners, the ones that aren't speaking at the moment, are just waiting to, your turn will come. Eventually we go all the way around and everyone gets a chance to be heard. And so we can also set a discussion topic and time limit. So we're going to have a 5-minute time limit. And the topic we're going to have today is to start practicing is the preface. We're going to be talking about the preface of the book. And with this is like the core basic practice that we see for empathic listening and creating this empathy circle kind of a practice. So I kind of see it metaphorically like a container, and we're here in this group of 6. We want to build this empathic container with each other. And what else? Let me bring up my page here. So one of the tasks for this group is going to be this one page that we have here, introduction. We'd like to create a slideshow that goes through kind of in more depth, and then we're going to translate that slideshow into a video. So one of our projects, down the line is going to be taking this basic instructions for doing an empathy circle and then kind of refining it and kind of going into more depth. But that's going to be something kind of farther down the line. So as I had mentioned to Andrea earlier, I had mentioned the preface and chapter 1 to be our discussion topic. And what we found in the other groups is that, we would do design teams, we would do like 2 or 3 chapters, and it was like too many concepts. So to keep things really simple, it was like just 1 chapter. So I'm thinking that for this meeting, maybe we just talk about the preface and about any questions about design project or whatever is alive for you. You can always speak about if there's a burning issue or something that you want to talk about, that you're always free in an empathy circle to speak about, to address that. So you don't have to just stay with the topic. And let's see. So I am going to do a quick screen share just as a reminder of what the preface, what was covered in the preface of the book. I'm bringing that up. I made a little slideshow for it. And let's present that. So this is just a very short, simple reminder of what the book preface is about. And in the preface, Bill Miller defines empathy. He asks, are you a good listener? He basically says the world has many problems. There's many problems in the world, and that we are hardwired for empathy, and he gives an overview of the book. His definition of empathy is, he says, it's more than a feeling for or with someone, and he uses this definition from Troax, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, which is the ability to perceive and communicate accurately and with sensitivity of the feelings and meanings of those feelings. So that is kind of the most basic introduction, just a reminder of what was in the preface. And so we're going to now, for about almost an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, do the empathic listening with each other. And so again, one person is going to select who they're going to speak to. That you can speak about, the preface, any questions or comments about the designing, the training, and or whatever is alive for you. And I'll keep time, so I'll set the time limit. And so if someone would like to, the best way to do this is just to jump into it and kind of learn by doing. So who would like to start? Maybe if you want to, you can choose me to reflect and we can model it, or you can choose anyone that you would like. Okay, go ahead. Andrea, you're muted, yep.
I had to find my cursor because I have two screens and they're kind of overlapping right now. So I was like, okay, so just
select who you like to speak to, begin speaking, and that person will give reflections.
I want to speak to Denise. Okay. And I'm just going to start talking about something I want to talk about from the preface. So I really was interested with his definition of empathy because there's so many different definitions. And recently I was watching a TED Talk, and you might have watched it, but this individual was talking about empathy. And he asked the audience what their definition would be. And the audience, they didn't really say anything. They kind of they didn't know whether they were supposed to say anything or not. And he said, most of you would probably say it's seeing an experience through someone else's eyes, or feeling that feeling that they went through. And he said that he felt this idea of thinking that we can do this is actually condescending to the individual who's experienced that. He says empathy is the righteous attempt at understanding that individual. And I found that I've never heard empathy described that way before. A lot of times we hear empathy as we all have similar experiences, and through mirror neurons in our brains, we can maybe understand, if your grandma died, and I had a grandma who died, maybe we're feeling the same thing.
So you might want to get some time to pause.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one thing that really stood out to you in thinking about both the preface and just the input that you've had is about what really is empathy and what is the basis for it. And you mentioned the mirroring and the neuroscience behind that piece, and really just kind of thinking through now what do we really mean by empathy, and how that might be similar to the mirroring, or how it might be. I was really struck by the righteous attempt at understanding. I mean, and so you're kind of looking at that and thinking, what's that about?
Yeah, and I guess I deal with a lot of abstract in my life. I'm more qualitative than quantitative, and so I love this world. But it's also, when you're dealing with empathy, it's like, is there one good definition? If somebody takes this course and we set out to define, okay, you're going to learn how to participate in empathic listening. Can we create a definitive definition for what empathy is, when so many different intellectuals have different interpretations on it? What would we as a group come up with?
So it seems like it's really important to you in thinking about the design as we go forward, that we're very clear that we come to agreement about what is the definition that we're going to use for empathy, and how we can convey that. So it may be that it comes from multiple sources, but it sounds like it's really important to you that we're very clear about how we're defining it for the purpose of the course.
Yes, exactly, because we don't want to come off as, I don't want to say ignorant. We want to come off as we're knowledgeable that it's a tough idea to convey. And I think being open and upfront about that will make people have more faith in our instruction, rather than, you know, them thinking, well, that seems kind of ignorant of them to think that's what empathy is. Yeah.
So that really looking at it, that we being transparent about the process of defining empathy, even of coming to the consensus about what it is, and acknowledging that there are other definitions that other people could bring in.
Yeah.
So I'm putting this up for 5 minutes. When it's 5 minutes, that's our time limit. So
okay, I saw 1 minute, and then I was like, wait, now it says 5.
Yeah, it's sorry about, yeah, it's 1 minute to go, and then 5 minutes. So
okay.
And it's not exactly, we're not going to be totally exact, but just general. So okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So Denise, your turn to select whoever you'd like.
Okay, I'm going to ask Daya.
Yeah.
So one thing, of course, I have to preface this about the preface, that my discussion of the preface, in that I'm so steeped in this. So this method and the definition of empathy and everything, it's like a part of my being. So there's nothing new in the preface that I haven't actively spoken about and dealt with in my work and in my world. So I'm already pretty steeped in it. And
okay.
You want
me to reflect right now?
Sure.
Or
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that you're wanting to be seen and heard, that this is something that you're already deeply involved with and you really believe in what you're doing.
Yeah. And the notion, several things that he mentions in the preface about this being a lifelong journey, about taking time to practice, and the actual the definition by Truax of you know, that it is both about developing and the capacity for understanding and conveying that understanding to someone else. That is critical. It happens in relationship with this process and this definition. It happens in relationship.
I'm also hearing that you see in the definition that there is a capacity in you, and that you have a capacity to be able to convey that that you can hold space effectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it isn't enough, and I think this is the basis of why people. I was one of those people that when people that are you a good listener, or why I went to counseling school, and it's like, because people talk to me and they come to me because I'm a good listener, and yet with myself to start with, and with all the students I've had since, that when you actually listen to their interactions, they aren't doing anything like listening. They're just mostly talking, or maybe asking questions, or doing things. They aren't demonstrating listening. So it is. I fall into that category too of recognizing that there's something there, like the development, our capacity for understanding might be there, but the ability to convey it so that the person actually understands or experiences being heard is a really important component, that they know, because it isn't until that loop is made where they actually they get it. They go, oh, I feel heard, that it is, that the loop is completed.
So you're also seeing that, acknowledging that you have the capacity, but when you're having people you have taught, or also other people who you see, or saying that they're doing empathic listening, but actually they are giving a lot of talk, and the complete listening happens when the other person is actually able to say that, yes, this is what happened, and this is what I feel heard.
Yeah.
That's when we're able to really convey that that you can hold space as a listener.
Yeah, and not only to be able to say it, but for them to experience it. Because when you experience being actually seen or known or heard, that's the I think that's the healing ingredient. And that was mentioned earlier, and so it's in both of those pieces. And I guess finally, I'm really interested. I know a lot of the developmental stuff, the neuroscience about how much we're hardwired and for this, and how we can utilize that knowledge or that understanding to help people learn, I think is another really interesting component of this, how we can help people tap into their own hard wiring.
Yeah, so I'm also hearing that it's not just the verbal acknowledgement that they've been heard, but also probably a physical expression which probably gives a little more understanding for themselves, and that goes into healing, and also that they've been heard. And I'm hearing that you are also interested in the neuroscience of it, that to actually be able to see whether the hardwiring is, what is said is that we are hardwired for empathy, how we can convey that to people.
Yeah. In teaching or in thinking about this, so much of it, and I'm struck by all the piece that Deborah brought in about mindfulness, because it really is a mindfulness practice. The deep empathy really involves you're tapping into that, your own hard wiring, if you will, but you got to create that space within for you to be able to perceive what is there. And it really is a mindfulness practice. And I think those making those connections with what is actually happening in the brain or in the mind is really that will be a useful part of this course.
So you're also wanting to bring awareness to what's happening inside our brains, and the mindfulness, and that really also you're seeing that really also will add value to what people need to know about empathic presence. Yeah.
And hopefully help them practice. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, my turn.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Deborah, can you reflect? Yeah. So when I read the first sentence in this preface, when you ask people if they're a good listener, and most people will say yes, I was actually laughing, because that's something I've heard a lot. But my real experience with the people who have said that has been very different, and I've had a lot of times experience of not being heard. And Yeah, so I've just been quite curious about how people perceive themselves, or what perceive themselves as good listeners, and what is it that they actually think deep listening is, or like yeah, like it says here, accurate empathy is. I've been quite curious thinking about what is it that people really think that they really are good listeners, uh, when the other person doesn't feel heard.
Okay.
Yeah, just
May
quick.
I reflect what I thought I heard?
Yeah.
You're interested in this topic of, and I'm not sure I caught the thread. So I'm asking if this is correct or not. Are you interested in and curious about if people think they are good listeners? If other people think they're good listeners, but they don't think they are, the person speaking does not think they are?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, my experience with people who have said that they're good listeners is of not being heard. I don't feel heard with them at all. So,
Okay. So say you're the one speaking to someone, and that other someone has said of themselves they think they're a good listener, but on the receiving end, you don't feel heard.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
you're curious about how this comes to be. You're curious about this whole phenomenon of people saying, I'm a good listener, but the receiver doesn't feel heard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm curious about what is it that they think about themselves as being good listeners when they are unable to hold presence, or as it says in the preface again about accurate empathy. It Yeah, I feel a huge disconnect with people who say that, yeah, I'm a good listener and you can speak to me, but it just doesn't come across as someone being able to hold space for me to be heard, or yeah.
Okay, so you're feeling, you said disconnect, some frustration, maybe disappointment, and the unable to connect with these people who are, they feel they're very adequate or very good at listening. There's no real connection occurring between you and them, and you feel at a loss about how this comes to be.
Yeah, and yeah, so it's also a thing of how do I convey to them what deep listening could be, how I would enjoy to be heard, and how, yeah, sometimes I guess I also feel very nervous in actually modeling it with more closer relationships where it's I feel nervous about how I would be seen, or whether I'm seen as someone who's teaching this and say that, come, this is what I know and this is what you've got to learn.
So you don't want to maybe come across as a know-it-all or condescending, that you know more than they do, and why don't you just listen to me the way I do it. You want to connect genuinely.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm done.
Did you feel heard?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Greg, would you be willing to listen to me?
Yes.
Thank you. So I've connected to everything everyone has said so far, but what really struck me is when I I saw the word capacity in the preface, and then hearing Denise speak about being hardwired, that reminded me of a concept that I use and teach, but it's actually found it from a Time magazine, about our neural pathways, that they are hardwired for problem solving. And if we did not have problems, we would not evolve. We are meant to problem solve and keep our neural pathways activated for that purpose. So for me, though, my experience is that we haven't learned anything new in the world of problem solving. We're still in the fight and flight phenomenon. And I feel disappointed and sad that we feel like we're so evolved, but we're using the wrong part of our brainstem to enhance that involvement.
So on one hand, we have this capacity. We are hardwired, and there are neural pathways, and we're geared to problem solve. And yet there are all these problems out there. We don't seem to evolve. We don't seem to tap into what we innately have and want.
Correct. Which is using that capacity, the neural pathways, using our what we've learned so far about evolving to the good, that if we do this together, we might all do better. If I eradicate your country, or eradicate you or your ideas just standing in a shopping line because of my judgment on you, or whatever, that we're slowly eradicating ourselves too in the process. So I feel sad we keep doing this.
Yeah, so I guess you seem like you have a deep concern for maybe our definition of evolving, which maybe it's too focused individually, and it's really leading, what we think is leading to us getting better is leading us to kind of some paths of destruction, versus kind of having a sense of shared purpose and realizing that we're in this together. And if we kind of consider evolving in that way, maybe we'll get on to something.
Right, if we don't understand the shared purpose. And just clarify, I think it's led us to be too individualistic, which I think is slightly different than individuals. I think we've missed the point of what is an individual, and what is it that makes, if I feel important, then you should feel important too, and we should understand this, that we have to recognize and appreciate to move forward in the best way possible, not in the best destructive way possible. So I think, yes, I think the shared, the goal has not been shared. The goals are not understood or shared. Yes.
So maybe kind of tying back to something you'd said even earlier in a different conversation about deeply understanding self first, and what that really means, and how that ties into to how I relate to you. So how do we, maybe as you're thinking through this project, how do we get folks to take that step of self-awareness that is also inclusive of others?
Exactly. Right. You once you get that self-awareness, it falls into place. It becomes more automatic. You come to understand and actualize and realize and live in the flow that everyone is equal, to their needs, and their life mission or their passions, or just to live, with the basics, the Maslow's hierarchy or anything else. Just, we're all the same.
Yeah, and the sense that if we're all the same, and what helps me survive and evolve is you surviving and evolving. Yes,
absolutely. Right. We changed the fight and flight to cooperation. Yes.
Yeah, that seems simple, but such a big shift, this idea.
Yes, you're right. Thank you. I feel heard.
So my turn to choose, I guess. Andrea, have you reflected yet?
All right, I'm listening.
All right. I guess I was struck looking at the preface I was hopeful and concerned at the same time in a short 2 pages. And some of that's been touched on already. Just this idea of everybody thinks they can do it, but it doesn't seem to be universally done. And that we're hardwired for this capacity of belonging and being, and yet we have all these problems.
Yeah, so what I think I'm hearing, other than typing, is is that it's happy knowledge that we do all have this capacity, but then it's also discouraging that we are not using it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. When I don't know about discouraging, maybe perplexing, and again, particularly thinking about the project, how do you bridge that divide? How do people tap into? I guess that's been talked about already. But how do people tap into what is innate, what we know kind of deep down, and when you read it, you go, yeah, that is hardwired. That is something everybody wants. So why aren't we doing it?
Yeah. So kind of, if we know it's good for us, if we know like so many things, why are we not doing it? And then, so it's kind of a lot of things in life we know are good for us and we don't do it, kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess that's true. So just because we know something's good for us doesn't mean it's something we're I know I need to move and eat well every day, but don't always move, don't always eat well. So, but yeah, and those are basic functions as well. Kind of, so how to make the connection? What is it that people kind of resonate with that would help them tap into their capacity, or even maybe in some cases, and maybe this is judgmental to even say, but maybe even want to. So do people want to be empathetic? I just read an article yesterday that a guy basically was fired at his job, and I don't know how much truth there was, kind of an opinion article, but he was talking about bringing empathy to work and was saying he'd been told at his previous place, and part of the reason he was let go is he was too empathetic. He wanted to treat people too well. And when they were considering firing decisions, he was saying, what about their family? What if this was a bad day? That sort of thing.
Okay, so then it's also, I think I hear, not only why would people want to, but it seems that you feel it might be discouraged because of instances like this article. First, genuinely, do people want to be empathetic to one another? And secondly, if they do, are they being discouraged by it in their workplace or society or the community they live in?
Yeah, I've had colleagues talk about, particularly like in politics, is there a place in politics for empathy? So yeah, do people even want to? And And if it's innate, it feels like the answer is yes. But yeah, how do you make that connection?
And it almost seems like the answer is yes, because do you think it's because if somebody says no, that makes them look bad? Or I don't know.
Yeah, maybe in certain contexts, empathy is seen as being soft on an issue.
Yeah. And people maybe say they want to, almost because if they don't, then they seem like a mean person. Like, it seems almost like you're saying people say they want to do it, but do they really want to do it? Like, are they sugarcoating an issue? Is that what I'm getting from you, kind of?
Yeah. And as I think about it, talking to you, I wonder if sometimes it's even how to do it. So kind of, again, that opposite thing of everybody could do it. It's innate that there are skills, and Bill talks about in the book there being ways to try it, but it is still a skill, and you've got to practice. So, maybe I'm the boss sometimes who says I'm empathetic, but then my actions aren't because I don't know how.
Yeah, and then okay, so you think there's people who want to be, but maybe since it's such an abstract concept, maybe they don't know how to be. And then is it that important for them to actually take a course on it, to take their time out of their busy life, especially a boss, to learn how to do, to practice empathic listening?
Yeah, maybe they've tried to find something, and as we've kind of discussed, there's not a lot that's easily accessible and available. Because I think most people, I think there'd be you'd have a few people who would say being a mean boss is good, but most people want to be a good boss or a good politician or whatever. So maybe some of it is just not knowing how.
So maybe it's just not ignorance. I don't like using the word ignorance, but I can't think of another word right now. Lack of knowledge. But,
thanks, Andy. I feel heard. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we keep going. For another, it's your turn. I haven't spoken yet, so if you want to.
Oh, should I speak to you?
Sure.
Let me think about something. Okay, so I teach. Last couple of Sundays I've been teaching a Sunday school class for individuals much older than me, and I learned from them. And this one individual, we were actually talking about listening, and she told me, isn't it interesting that the word listen and the word silent have the exact same letters in them? And then she just stared at me. And I was not entirely sure what to do with that. So I said, yeah, maybe you're supposed to be silent when you're listening, but there's more to it than that.
Okay, so you're teaching a Sunday class? Sunday school class, and you're with people who are older than you.
About 40 years older.
Oh. And so someone just came up, said to you, hey, there's silent and listening have the same amount of letters, and you're kind of like wondering, what do I do with what she just said? And then you just kind of came up with the idea that maybe you're supposed to be silent when you listen.
Yeah, and I think that's what she was trying to point out in Sunday school is we try to talk, have these groups, but maybe I wasn't listening as the leader. Maybe I was talking too much. Mm. And maybe that was her subtle way of saying, hey, you're not listening to me. But I went home with it, and I typed it in the document because I found it so fascinating. I didn't believe her at first. And I was like, the S, and I was crossing them out, the letters, to make sure that she was right. It's just this different, I can't remember what you call that when something has the same letters, but it's like a different word. But it made me think about listening and empathic listening, and how maybe I need to try it more rather than just in this meeting that we have weekly.
Okay. So when she said this to you, you were sort of intrigued by the sort of the nature of this word, if it really was accurate and all that. And also, like, what was the message she was trying to give you? And was she trying to tell you, hey, you're speaking too much, maybe you should listen more? And so you're kind of taking that to heart, and well, maybe you should be feeling you should be listening more, and not just here like in this circle, but be listening more in general.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's almost practice what you preach, almost, because I'm always yapping at my husband about empathy, and he's a police officer, and he's in the military, and I'm always telling him about empathy and how that would go, good with what he's doing, but I don't ever look at myself and see exactly what I'm doing. So it was something that reminded me that I need to keep myself in check if I'm going to try to keep others informed.
Okay, so if you're spreading the word about empathy, you need to also look at yourself and see, are you being kind of modeling it and being empathic and kind of looking at, you need to be doing it, not just talking about it.
Need to be present in everything I do with it, rather than just talking the talk.
Mm-hmm. So walk the walk, not just, walk the talk, I guess, and be present with that empathic presence.
Yep. I feel heard.
Okay. Then you had a minute. So I'll speak to Denise then.
Okay.
Okay, so the topic came up about definitions, and it is such a nightmare with definitions. It's there's so much confusion, different definitions. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, so just struggling with how do you land on that? Because there's so much, and they can be very different from perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, different perspectives have different definitions. The way I'm kind of looking at it for this training is to look at the relational empathy, which I call a culture of empathy. So a lot of the empathy, the definition of empathy comes from sort of an individualistic viewpoint. And a culture of empathy is thinking of the relationship of all people. Like all of us here are in a relationship. So we want to think of not only our individual skills in empathy, but what is sort of the level of empathy in the whole group, and then there's different components of that. So, yeah. So
looking at it from the relational perspective, and also it seems like creating a culture, if you will, in term that demonstrates elements of empathy. So building that definition on what is it that allows the group to experience being heard and seen and known, not just as individuals, but sort of as connected as a group.
Yeah,
their relationship with each other, and building the definition that way.
Yeah, it's exactly starting with that definition that this is really a training to create a culture of empathy, which means in a relationship, it's just not me as an individual having to empathize with everyone else. It's that we're looking for mutually empathic relationships in a society and a culture where everyone empathizes with everyone else. And there's components of that. There's the self-connection component, there's empathizing with others, there's supporting others and empathizing with each other, it's creating social structures that support empathy. So it's sort of seeing this wholeness of a culture of empathy is sort of the kind of the vision I have for the training.
Yeah. So it's a broader thing. I mean, it involves, and you mentioned in waves, sort of in steps that you go, like from the exploring the self to connecting with someone else to facilitating other people connecting to building this. And you had a circle, like building this culture. And it seems like the idea of pulling, how do you engage people in? How do you define that in a way that people go, hey, I want to do that?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, that's part of the task I see, is we need to create this vision of this culture of empathy. It's just, the book is a bit more geared to the individualistic, you as an individual learning this skill to empathize with others and listen. And what I like to frame the training around, though, that's like a component of it, an important component, but is that our task is creating that culture of empathy, the wholeness of the whole system being empathic, and what's the level, and that, we kind of break it down into the components of it, and you can learn each of the components, and what we're doing. And here, what we're doing here in a group is we're trying to build a culture of empathy between each of us. Everyone feels heard, everyone feels seen, everyone feels acknowledged, and there's a whole cultural environment that's supportive of creating that mutual, relational empathy.
I'm really struck with the notion of how important it is for this to help create that vision, that you're, the creating the vision that you're working towards, and there may be these components that you have in there, but you're really wanting to be able to articulate that vision of what would this be like? What is it we're actually working for? And we're using this book or these steps or these skills to facilitate that. But the goal is the bigger vision.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. Beautiful. I feel heard. I feel warm and tingly inside. So, okay, well, I think we've gone through everyone having done one round of speaking and listening. So maybe we could go around, and how was that? What was your experience of this empathic listening with each other? So this empathy circle that we did. Well, what's everyone's experience? What kind of stepping out of what we just did? How was the experience? If we just go around, anyone want to jump in?
I guess I'll go first. I guess I didn't realize how, I know once I start talking, it's hard for me to pause because I get so excited about what I'm talking about. So I guess this experience helped me realize that when I'm talking, I need to not so much be in my own mind, because I go there a lot, especially when I'm teaching. And to actually be present with the people that I am talking to help them listen. And this really kind of helped me realize that.
Okay, so you're just doing this practice. You're getting a bit of awareness of how you need to be present with people that you're listening to, and not go into your head. And you have a tendency of going into your head and talking. This gave you a little bit of insight into how you need to have that presence. Okay. Okay, Deborah?
A couple of things. I felt very stimulated by the last conversation between you and Denise about, what your vision is of a larger culture. And so it reminds me of the ripple effect. You drop a stone and you have the smaller circle, and then it gets bigger and bigger. And it reminded me of lots of cultures, and particularly known for particular things, like Bhutan is the happiest. Their gross national product is supposed to be happiness. There's some cultures that force feed women to be heavy. And then there's a friend lived in the Philippines, and they always competed about who could be the nicest, socially nicest. Like in some other cultures, compete on who brings the best gift to the house. The Japanese have, different competitions. So I'm not saying this is a competition, but it just reminds me of what could we be known for?
Mm-hmm.
What could we really stand out for when people think of a company? It could be IBM, could be Microsoft, or a country or a state. What are people known for? I mean, certain states are known for certain things, like the lowest in education. Or, so that, and people will begin to associate that and think, so we're spreading the idea that this could be contagious.
Okay, so may I just reflect? So what I'm hearing there is that just what we talked about with the culture of empathy, that really resonated with you, and that there's different cultures with different values, and can we be known for having an empathic, our culture be known for America or wherever, a culture of empathy, a value of empathy, and that really resonated with you.
Right. I mean, we're actually known as the land of freedom. People actually came here for that purpose. So
how about the process of the empathy circle, like, the reflective listening, kind of the container of the empathic listening? How was that?
Yes, I wanted to get to that.
Okay.
I really enjoyed it. I felt I got a sense that our skill level is good, and we listened, and there was not, there was respect at the time and frame, and we understood the process, and we adhered to it, and not only that, it seemed like a good cohesive exchange. From what I noticed, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed being able to do it just on the basic, simple terms, which is actually what it is, not some highfalutin idea. So that's the practice I appreciate, and I know I need. It's just the nuts and bolts of reflective, were you heard, and I wasn't heard, or clarification, redoing it. So, and as the six of us, it seemed to go well for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it went well, and you're also seeing the benefits of just doing the nuts and bolts of this empathic listening. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Building on that too, the practice and the cohesion that you mentioned, it seems like this is it's an opportunity, this process, for continuing to create, because what I noticed is that people build off of each other, and that when they're talking about it, people draw from not just their own, but from what someone else has said, and when you're talking about building that vision, this is really a helpful process for building vision, because you are drawing off of each other. It's not just individuals speaking, but there's this weaving that happens through it as you're doing it. People kind of weave the different elements together as it continues to go around. So I think the recognizing the value of that in terms of creation and what we're moving to create is useful.
Okay, so I'm hearing there is it's sort of the creativity aspect of it. We're kind of building on each other's ideas, weaving the ideas together, and we'll be creating our training. So it's a creative practice. Mm-hmm. Okay, is there more? Is that?
No, that I just I noticed it. I noticed it in almost everyone brought in something from the other, brought in something from someone else, and building on that. So you're just continuing to create together.
So you were actually noticing the building process. It was kind of obvious then. So okay. Was it Daya or Greg or?
Yeah, I can go.
Okay.
yeah, the process of the listening circle kind of helped me also with um, just noticing how at times in groups I feel very, very self-conscious about what I'm saying. You know, sometimes I'm I kind of judge myself on, am I really reflecting well, or you know, so just kind of noticed that I was doing it here. And at the same time, I'm also feeling a lot of safety in having this practice with all of you. There is some kind of openness that's happening, which is like, yeah, there's just that freedom which I haven't experienced in other groups. And so I'm really feeling kind of warm and trusted space to explore this and build this thing together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you do this reflective listening, what I'm hearing, or empathic listening, you feel some judgment of yourself, or questioning, am I doing this accurately? So that did surface a bit here, but you also have a sense of safety and warmth and looking forward to the creativity, the creating.
Yeah.
I got that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there more, or is that?
No, that's
Okay.
it, yeah.
Okay, Greg?
Yeah, so the simplicity of the container, the instructions make it very nice. That I kind of know what my role is and what the other person's role is, and how that there's going to be an end time to that. So that was instructive. I think, there's a short 2 pages that we talked about, but just kind of, again, realizing I have my ideas and my perspective, and that while we all kind of, Denise talked about weaving together, everybody had a little bit of a different perspective too. So that's both good and nice to be able to weave that all into one thing for creation. So I like that. I did think, I guess I was thinking about, I touched on it a little bit, is if I were to get on and then the first thing were to be, let's do this process, that would be difficult. So to having the little bit of time to get to know one another, build rapport before, pretty important.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Yeah.
Okay, so the simplicity of the process was, you appreciate that, kind of beginning, middle, and end. Just jumping into the process may be a little too much for people, so having a little space for developing rapport would be good for introducing this. And you're seeing the building process too, and everybody has a little bit of a different take too, bit of a different perspective, and contribute that. So, okay, is there more, or is there?
No, that's good.
Okay,
thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so one of our tasks, you can think, is we'll be doing these empathy circles, and at every meeting, is to think of how do we introduce these empathy circles. I've started a slideshow, a Google slide to lay out the steps. We have the 1-page description, but we would like to lay it out, kind of, address it. It's like, what are the issues, what are the concerns you may have? Because what, Deo, what you're saying about feeling anxiety, like, am I doing this right? How do we say this is a potential that you're going to experience? You may feel anxiety, and then, prepare people for that, and then say, give some kind of a response. So that will be, one project is creating a basically introductory training video that we can put online to introduce the empathy circle. So this was, a simple first, meeting. Everyone introduced each other. Dee Dee couldn't make it. She also, today I forgot to mention, she's also from the motivational interviewing community, actually lives not too far from here. I haven't met her before, but it's great, somebody local. And so hopefully she'll be able to join us next week. Next week we'll continue with chapter 1 then. I think it was really good that we just did the preface instead of getting too many concepts. So we'll do chapter 1 next week. And we have the basic empathy circle. Each meeting sort of adds some skill level, to that container, as well as we're going to create the video about of the process. And so we'll slowly build in, just so you see how the creativity, how it slowly evolves and sort of what emerges. So with that, I guess we could just maybe do a round of, sort of a closing. And I'll just say, I feel excited. This is a very warm group. I feel it's very warm and supportive, and I feel very delighted. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very excited with this group, and I think you guys can all keep me in check because I blabber on, and it's really a privilege to meet all of you, and everybody's so different, yet we're all so similar, I feel, and just thanks for participating. I really enjoyed it.
So I appreciate everyone's openness and willing to be here and help support each other and learn. Thank you.
Going along with that, I appreciate everyone coming too, and also the richness of having the different perspectives and people willing to bring their perspectives in and to really do that kind of that deep exploration for themselves in the group will be really beneficial, and I think it's going to be very helpful to have as broad a range as we do of experience and expertise. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. I also want to thank everyone for the openness and this. I guess that's what is also giving me a feeling of warmth with the group. And I'm really excited to be in a project which is really meaningful and really close to what I want to create also in my community here. And I was really excited when I saw about the empathy tent last year, and it was something that motivated me to be part of this also.
Yeah, I also appreciate the warmth of everyone, making an introvert feel welcome. And so, but excited about the project, looking forward to our next time together.
Okay, with that, then we will see you next week. Same time, you can connect directly via email with our group, as well as there's a larger listserv if you want to connect with the larger, there's 4 teams. You send to that listserv, it'll send out a message to everyone. So with that, thank you, and look forward to next week, and have a good rest of the week.